Welcome back. Today I'm going to go over a build guide with the Tyranids versus the Blood Angels per request from some of the subscribers and people that have been watching my videos. It's been requested by several people, and I actually had the inspiration for this build from one of the opponents I had actually been playing against. Now he went with kind of a mixed Genestealer Broodlord build, and I did not find that really worked out well for him because the Space Marines or the Blood Angels are likely going to have some flamers that can easily negate your evasion bonuses. And I'd rather just stack up the synapses with the build that I have here, because then everything should be able to gain from the synapses, and it just kind of makes a more cohesive force. If you've been watching a lot of my videos, you know I'm kind of down on the Broodlord and Genestealers. They definitely have some interesting mechanics, but I find that the Blood Angels are able just to easily counteract it too easily. So I think this build is much more efficient and effective against the Space Marine army here, because you can just totally overwhelm them. I also have some matches where I use this build against some Blood Angels too, so if you want to see how I go about using them in an actual match, you can check out those videos where I have a couple of examples, and then I also have an example of how I use the Blood Angels to counteract his build when he did have the Genestealers and Broodlord build, because it was pretty difficult to deal with at first, especially because I went with a real elite build. I was able to just overwhelm him with just forces, whereas this build here should allow you to counteract most of the Blood Angel builds to help you come to victory. So again, I think this is just a more efficient option. So first, what this video series is a faction versus faction. So if there are certain factions that you're having difficulty playing against, just comment below in the bottom of this video, and I will try to make you an example build of what I would do to try to play against that faction, and hopefully have you have a more successful experience with your matches here. But first, if you're enjoying these videos, please give my channel a like and subscribe. Encourage me to post more content for you. So, the Tyranid versus Blood Angel matchup. This is definitely a difficult one, because the Blood Angels have lots of really good units to fight you. Now, you do have lots of good units to fight them, but they are typically going to be a little bit better than you are at getting kills, and that's kind of how the game has been set up with the traditional campaign. So the big thing for your general strategy here is you're going to be bringing a lot of low-tier units, because all the low-tier units here have access to what's called the swarm tactics here. And so for and it can stack up to 4 times, so up to 4 stacks you'll get 35% melee damage or 35% range damage. So that means you're doing 140% melee and 140% range damage if you have the 4 stacks available. And I think using these gargoyles here helps you get the stack as well much easier, because they have the 6 movement. So I really like to have a lot of gargoyles here. And then you can also spam your blinding venom as well, which will allow you to do at least 15 damage to every model that's poisoned. And then for 2 turns they have ranged accuracy and -10 evasion, which will then allow your units to help get additional kills. But that's not all. If you have your synapse creatures here, like your primes or your warriors, then you can have up to 3 stacks of synaptic leaders, and that means at full amount of stacks here you'll have 30% accuracy, 15% evasion, and what would that be, 225% momentum gain. So that can allow you to really just pop off and get extra attacks and empowered abilities like nobody's business. Now with this build here, pretty much your empowered abilities are going to mostly be mitigated and not utilized. You're going to want the additional attacks, but if you're having a more elite build, then this would allow you to do even more. But again, I'm traditionally just going to be using this for additional attacks with my units here. So your opponent is going to be bringing a lot of flamers, most likely. What I find a lot of people have been doing is they'll bring death companies out with hand flamers, because once they get to attack you with the hand flamer, they'll squad wipe any of your low tier infantry, and that'll generate enough momentum for them to get a second attack, and so each one of those can squad wipe 2 of your low tier units, or if they're able to clear away and then attack one of your medium tier units or your HQ leader, they'll have the Death Company Black Rage ability stacking up, and I think that gives them +5 damage per hit. up to 5 if I think, so that could be up to 25%, 25 damage, and then they attack twice, so that's 50 extra damage per model potentially if they all land their attacks, but in exchange they lose their evasion. Now they also have more HP and more armor than the assault marines, so that's why I like to have these primes here. So after they jump, assuming the primes don't get killed, I can then run the primes in there and start killing them in melee, and then you'll get enough model kills there that for every unit you kill, you should have a 75% chance to trigger an additional AP with 50% additional melee damage. So that means you will have up to 3 attacks with these guys, and they have pretty decent base damage and splash, and then you throw in the 50% melee. This guy can definitely be a powerhouse, but he's easy to kill, so you just have to be careful with that. And then because he's getting so many kills of high value targets, it's easy for him to then get up to full momentum to then get a 4th attack as well. But you would ideally want to get that AP going after you trigger the natural killer, so you're getting the 50% melee attack here. And so you'll use him to lock down guys in melee, finish off units, and then hide, and then also assassinate enemy leaders as you're needing, and then moving your lower tier infantry to get as many kills as you like. So I think this works out pretty well. The big thing is, while you're going to be triggering all these guys to be close together for the swarm tactics, because you know they're going to be having flamers, you either want to have a big wall of units to protect your high value units, or you want to have these guys spaced out. So if he brings like a Furioso Dreadnought or somebody else that has a heavy flamer that has a range 2, you don't want them to be able to nuke all of your infantry, so you'll be bunched together to attack, and then you'll kind of space out a little bit unless you're just trying to body block them from getting to your high value target. So that's how this will work. And then you'll want to be sniping out the enemy heroes. That way you don't have to worry about them summoning additional assault marines to assassinate your warriors or other high value targets. The one downside to this build is the Space Marines can counter it pretty hard with their single command point ability, that strafing run, because between using that strafing run and then the death companies, they can really kill most of your low tier forces pretty effectively here, because you know if they end up attacking and killing 2 of these gargoyle squads, then that's 90 points of value that they just generated, and that's almost as much as they cost, and then the following turn they may be able to survive and get additional attacks. So you definitely gotta be careful. So you're just trying to overwhelm the forces here. And then what you'll do is you use your Venomthropes to use their Spore Clouds to soak up any Overwatch, because there's more likely going to be some Hellblasters or other ranged units, so you'll use those to do it, to soak up that Overwatch and help you get into combat. And then you will end up, because that gives you 25% evasion, so they go up to 30, and then they get up to 5 ranged armor, so they can tank some hits. And then you do have, and that's a free action, whereas the Toxic Presence does take an AP. And so if somebody is poisoned and you apply this, then they'll suffer 65% additional poison damage, which can be nice. Or if the enemy units are within the area of effect of the Toxic Presence, and it's pretty much 1 square around the model. So if this was the Venomthrope here, it'd just be around here. Then any unit that's standing in there, that's an enemy unit, I should say, it doesn't apply the negative traits onto your units, will suffer 35% range damage and plus 35% melee damage that they'll be taking. So that'll allow your units to be doing even more damage in addition to all the synaptic bonuses they'll get. So these guys are really good for running and holding strategic command points, throwing down this Toxic Presence, which sticks around for 2 turns, and then applying poison to everybody that's around you as well. So that can definitely really help you liquidate those enemy forces. Now the big thing to note is whoever uses the poison ability first, that's the poison that'll be applied to the enemy units. So let's say you have these guys and you're using the poison, and then you have the Tyrannifex or the Hive Tyrant, then they're, even though they have a stronger poison, which would be 40 I think for these guys here, the 15 damage would be applied from the Venomthrope just because they applied the poison first. So just be aware of your order of operations when you're about to apply poisons, because they don't stack, and whichever one's applied first is the one that'll be carried over onto the next turn, which is unfortunate. So the stronger poison does not remove the weaker poison, so that can be a bit of an issue. But that allows you to have really effective ways to hold these guys down. And then their attacks and melee also apply a poison as well, that 15 damage. So you can use this to help whittle down stronger infantry like the Sanguinary Guard, Terminators, because these guys have a good basic damage to do at base, and then they apply that poison. Now, the Sanguinary Priest can remove the poison from the enemy units and can also negate your poison blinding venom, but they're going to have only 1 or 2 of those Sanguinary Priests. So if you have a bunch of these gargoyles here, you can just totally overwhelm and nullify the effectiveness of any Hellblasters, which may be utilized to try to assassinate your troops, or to help mitigate the attacks coming in from the Death Company. Now, just be aware, if the Death Company have the Hand Flamers, they'll just keep using the Hand Flamer, because the Hand Flamer has 100% accuracy whether they're blinded or not, but it will interfere with the melee. Oh wait, no it won't, because this only is ranged attacks. I thought it was general accuracy, but it's just range. So forget that, what I just said there. It only will affect the range. So you wouldn't apply this to a Terminator to reduce his melee accuracy, but you would get the evasion bonuses there to help hit him easier. Now, I like to utilize the Hive Guard and have 2 of these guys because they'll have the Shockwave Cannon. And now, while it sucks at damaging anything but vehicles, if there are a couple of vehicles involved, whether it be the Land Speeders, which will frequently come out, or a Furioso with how much they've been buffed recently with the recent patch, or a Predator tank, then this will allow you to get double damage effectively to vehicles, get up to armor piercing of 7, and then get a 15% crit chance. And so these guys can one-shot a land speeder if all 3 of the attacks go off, and then that should give them enough momentum if they have the 3 Synaptic Leader charges on there to be pretty close to 100% accuracy, assuming they're shooting at the optimal range, and also getting the bonus momentum should allow them to do double attacks, and so these guys can just completely destroy vehicles. But because of that, they're likely going to be focused down if the enemy has a heavy vehicle army. So you'll want to make sure you focus fire down those vehicles right away before these guys got killed, because then that is the one downside to this army, is they will have some difficulty killing enemy vehicles once these Hive Guards are down. So try to snipe those guys down as fast as possible, or keep your Hive Guard hidden behind other low tier units so you can keep getting the attacks off. Now I go for max gargoyles, again because they have that blinding venom, but also because they're flying and have the movement of 6, so you can stack up those bonuses effective as possible. And then they also have pretty decent evasion, so once you get another 15 evasion on there, these guys have 30 evasion, so if guys are from afar, these guys can actually tank a surprising amount of hits. And then it's really easy for them to get the swarm tactics going to help buff up your melee units, and then run these guys away to not get wiped out. And then because they're flying, they can go over difficult terrain, and that makes it really easy for these guys to run around and capture strategic command points, so that can be very useful for you. Now I also go with 4 warriors on this build with the Death Spitter, because this has a little more armor piercing than the default weapon here. And so what I'll do is I'll usually have weakened down enemy forces and they look like they're about to get a kill. Then I'll use the warriors here to kill with the Death Splitter, because they also have the natural killer ability just like the Tyranid Prime does. And so per each model that they kill, it's a 75% chance to trigger for the extra action point. So effectively, if you can kill 2 models, you have a 150% chance to activate this, which means it should go off. And that'll get them 50% melee and an extra action point. So if you can't get them into melee, you'll just get a second round of attacks with your Death Spitters here, which work out to do pretty decent damage against all the infantry, other than maybe the Terminators, because they have such reduced damage. But the Scything Talons is incredibly powerful, because they get 3 attacks doing 14 to 19 with an armor piercing of 500% accuracy. So, you know, getting an extra 50% there with those 3 attacks, that means they're effectively doing 40, what would that be? Yeah, 45 to 60 damage at baseline, and then you throw in an extra 50% on there, and you can see how these guys can help you take down vehicles. But again, you need to keep them alive with this build because you want to have at least 3 synaptic creatures at any time buffing up your units to get those momentum bonuses going. And I find that the Death Spitters are just much more effective than the Devourers at killing the Blood Angels because they have so much armor with the power armor that the Devourers just have a little bit of difficulty doing damage, whereas the Death Spitter will allow you to to damage the infantry and guarantee those kills to then get an extra action point. And then I finish off the build with the Hormagaunts. Some people like to do the build with the Termagants. That's not a bad option because the Termagants are cheaper, and so you can bring more of them. I would say if you're going to do that, you probably want to throw some Gene Stealers in there so you have something that's a little bit better at armor piercing, but then the Blood Angels are just going to snipe them down. So I find that the Hormagaunts work better because they have the 5 movement, and then because they are attacking in melee, they do a little more damage than the range, and they also have 4 armor piercing. Now again, they benefit from the swarm tactic, so you can get that damage increased to 240% if they have the 4 stacks there, or sorry, 140% if they have the stacks there. But they also have access to this leap ability, and so this is actually pretty powerful. You're thinking, oh great, you just get 1 more armor piercing, what does that really matter? Well, it can matter a lot because it counts as a charge attack. So the big thing is you don't want to use this leap ability to attack somebody with a pistol or a hand flamer because they'll get to do the reaction fire, and that will likely interfere and damage your Hormagaunts. But let's say you're going to fight down or try to melee down a Terminator or somebody that has more armor or a vehicle. Just getting the 1 armor by itself will help you get kills with the increased armor. But with this being a charge attack, let's say you're going to get go toe-to-toe with a Terminator with Storm Shield, then you can do this charge attack even though you've already moved and got them into synaptic range, and then you won't get it counterattacked because it's considered a charge attack. And it also allows you to jump over minor obstacles. So let's say they're on a stairwell. Well, you can run around the side of that stair where you normally couldn't attack at an angle, and now you can jump over that minor stairwell and get an attack. And then if this is empowered, you can actually attack from 2 tiles away. So that can help you kill units that may be in a choke point or something as well. But this can be quite powerful, and then they can do a surprising amount of damage as you are getting the kills stacked up with your synapse, so that can be very, very helpful for you. And then it just has a 1-turn cooldown, so you can effectively spam it every turn as needed. But I find this to be a pretty effective build to get the wins. So I've won a couple of matches using this now, so I think this is my go-to build against the Space Marines. Now, if you wanted to do the command point abilities, I think it depends on the situation. The tier 1 command point ability can be good with the Space Marines because you don't want them to be spamming their their flamers and getting lots of kills, because you're trying to just overwhelm them with forces, and then they're going to try to slaughter you. So it's just going to be a real intense engagement with these kind of battles. And so if you find that they're gaining lots of momentum built up, then you can use your tier 1 ability and use that Psychic Screech to remove the momentum. And then if everybody's on Overwatch, that will also mitigate the Overwatch as well before you move in, because most of these guys are going to get shot up moving through the Overwatch. So that's an option. Or if he has a lot of infantry, then you can use the Venom Strafe, which is your tier 2 ability, and that will do significant damage against most of the infantry, and then it applies a pretty powerful poison as well that will get applied the following turn and allow you to kill a lot of models. So that can either help you weaken guys up to let your troops then get the kill with the warriors and then get the extra action point, or to then have them suffer a bunch of model losses at the end of their turn the following turn once that poison is applied. And then again, if you have the Venom Thropes out there and those guys are standing in the Toxic Presence, that'll increase the damage even further by 65% with that passive ability. and we talked about the Blood Angel Strategic Command abilities here as well that they'll likely be using on you. The big thing is just making sure if they get enough to tier 2, they're going to use the Assault Marines either to back cap one of the Strategic Command points or to jump one of your warriors and then try to get the kill of a synaptic creature. So you just got to be careful with that. But another very viable option is for them just to use that strafing run continuously, just killing your low tier units. So just be aware. Now, alternative units, if you are looking to play against the Blood Angels, I think most things are pretty viable. The Hive Tyrant is an excellent unit. It's just he's expensive, so I rarely get him to pay for himself. But just be aware that the Heavy Venom Cannon does apply a stronger poison, and it does a base damage of 60 to 80 with a splash of 12 to 16 times 2. But each one of those splashes, while you may think, oh man, this sucks, it's because it applies that poison that's going to do 30 to 40 damage the following turn if it's not healed off. That'll allow this to be very powerful, so that'll guarantee that you're doing, you know, 100 damage if you land the attack and the poison's not mitigated. Or you can get him into melee here, and then he'll do substantial damage as well. You're then buffing up your units with either the range bonus, giving yourself the 10% ranged accuracy, which can help your Hive Guards get the shots off against the vehicles. But if you're using this build, you would more likely want to transition it over to the melee bonus. That way you're getting the increased melee accuracy, since most of these other units with the synapses are going to have good enough accuracy without you buffing it up there, and you're going to want to get the melee to be killing those vehicles. Now, you do have access to the Psychic Scream, which will also help you reduce the momentum gains from your enemies, because you can use a range 2 attack that'll do 30 to 40 psychic damage and also remove 40 momentum, so that can be very good to stop your opponent from being able to surge. And then the most important ability that he has is he has the Hive Mind Will, and anything that's within 3 tiles of him will get 15 momentum, and that lasts for 2 turns. So you may think, well, that doesn't seem like it's very good. The big thing you got to appreciate with that ability is with the synapses, remember you're getting 225% momentum gain, so 15 times 225 is nothing to sneeze at, and that can allow you to very effectively just start surging or empowering abilities depending on what units you're bringing with you after they start to get some kills. So that can definitely help your units. Another alternative unit would be the Turvagon. You know, he does decent melee damage, allowing you to kill most of the infantry that may be coming. You can then spawn in a Termagant every 2 turns, and you have up to 5 ammunition here. He also has the Catalyst healing ability. Now, the big thing is it'll only heal up to 50 HP per turn, so if you apply this to, like, your warriors, it'll only heal them for, like, 12 health each, which is not great. Or I guess it would be like 15. And then it'll heal another 15 the following turn, but the bigger thing is it increases the melee damage by 25%, so applying that 50% or 50 HP heal with a 25% damage, and then you trigger Natural Killer for an additional 50%, that can make the warriors or the Prime or your Trigone, anything that's a hard damage dealer, that can definitely get you where you need to be. And then the Stinger Salvo also does good damage against the low tier infantry as well, doing 30 to 40 damage, and so that's just a range 2 ability. And then it's also a Synaptic Leader, just as the Hive Tyrant is. A unit I don't like to bring, well, let's just keep going about the ones I would bring. The Tyranid is another alternative option. You know, he's got they have Acid as Tyranids, but that's considered your heavy flamer. The big thing is this is acidic, so the damage that it would apply, well, let's say this. So it does damage like a heavy flamer. You know, it has 10 attacks with base damage of 9 to 6, or yeah, 6 to 9, and then armor piercing of 3, so it does good damage, and then it has a range 2, so you can kill a lot of units. If he's fighting a vehicle or you want to get a zone of control, you can use the powerful limbs. And then he also has the ability here that'll allow you to start getting some extra armor piercing, so effectively getting an extra 3 armor piercing, bringing this up to 6 if you use the adaptive targeting with an additional 20% melee. So this will allow you to do more damage to vehicles, because this has the acidic trait, which is like poison, except the acidic trait only works on vehicles, so then it applies a 40 extra damage to the vehicle. if it survives, so that'll allow you to do more damage than you would in melee, assuming you want to sacrifice your movement and not move them. Another good alternative is the Trigone, because if you can get him to burrow in the middle of a bunch of units, let's say he's got a big group of units, you killed everybody here, you burrow into the middle, then you can use the bioelectric shock and do damage to every model that's surrounding you within one tile, doing 30 to 40 damage. Now, the thing that's stupid about this is it doesn't tell you what the armor piercing of it is, but I'm guessing it's low, because unless you're fighting low-tier, low-armored units, you're not going to do the full 30 to 40 damage. But it is still, if you applied it to everybody that's around you, you're going to be doing more damage than you would with your single attacks. But if there's somebody that's real powerful, like a Terminator that's in front of you, you're more likely going to want to just use the Scything Talon here to do 90 to 120 damage to one model, and then doing splash damage, doing 31 to 42 damage to everybody that's around there. So again, you could hit these guys with a rear attack. You won't activate the Overwatch if you do the burrow, and that can allow you to also get into the rear of enemy units to then allow you to do some sneak attacks here, and then follow it up with the warriors to start getting kills. So these guys can be very good. If you have a big open map, then the Exocrines can be very powerful. If you played against the Tyranids on the regular campaign, you know that these guys can one-shot any of your infantry units that are low tier. Once they use the plasmatic build-up here and the symbiotic targeting to increase their damage, so just be aware that that can be a good strategy. If you're going to have a little bit of a tighter quarters, then using the Thornback can work out very well. Just be aware that the Devourer and the Death Splitter, I think, both have reaction fire. Now, the default weapon has a poison, so it'll be applied to infantry, and the Death Splitter will apply a acidic trait, so that'll do bonus damage to vehicles. So just be aware of the difference there. And then they do 3 attacks with the monster Scything Talons with 8 armor piercing. And then when they have the zone of control, if somebody tries to run away from them, they'll get all 3 of those attacks when they're trying to break contact with you. So that can be very nice. And then another potential alternative would be the Gene Stealer. I typically don't like to bring these guys just because at 65 points, I can bring, 2 Termagants or almost 2 Hormagaunts. And these guys do not get the bonuses of the synaptic units because they use the Brood Telepathy, which only gets applied by the other Gene Stealers, or if you have the Brood Lords, you would use the Evolved Telepathy, and these guys have a little bit of, I think it's like a 3x3 range around them. And then these guys have to be directly touching each other for the Brood Telepathy. Unless you're in the range of the Evolved Brood Telepathy, then it'll apply the Brood Telepathy to your Gene Stealers. But again, I don't like to do that. And then these guys can still be squad wiped with a single flamer attack. So these guys just don't have the survivability. So I'd rather just go massive units. But if you were to use like the other player's build, then he liked to use the Gene Stealers. But again, I don't find them to be very effective. Units I wouldn't recommend bringing are the Broodlord, and that's because they're quite expensive at 195 points. He can wreck a lot of units because he gets the 3 attacks here with 8 armor piercing, so he's actually an excellent vehicle killer. And then he has the Proxim ability, but it only has a range of 3, so the chances are you're likely going to just get shot up trying to get this guy into combat, because you're supposed to be using this evasion and the evolved Brood Telepathy to help increase their evasion further, but you're likely just going to get yourself killed, so better to use those resources elsewhere. I also don't recommend bringing the Biovore because it only has 4 armor piercing, and so you're going to have to get multiple shots on the potentially up to 3 attacks to wipe out an assault squad or or other low tier units, so it's just not cost effective. And then because they're going to have Hellblasters, they can easily one-shot these guys, and then you have to worry about them blowing up and killing your models that are within 1 square, so it's just too much of a liability. Same with the Pyrovore, because the Sanguinary Guard, the Assault Marines, all those things can kill these guys very easily, and they just get sniped down too easily, and so just don't bring them. You have a much better unit that's only 80 points more, with almost double the health. Got an extra 30%
armor increase here, and then he's also better at killing vehicles. So I hope that helps with giving the reasoning about units that I do and don't bring. Like I said, you have a lot of flexibility depending on the map, but generally, assuming you're going to be playing a Strategic Command objective, I find this to be one of the most effective builds against the Blood Angels. So with that, I'm going to sign off for the day. If you're struggling playing against any factions and you want me to give you an example of a faction versus faction army build, I can certainly do that. Just make sure that you look at my playlist that has the faction versus faction builds that I've already created, so that way you're not asking for a build that's already been made. But otherwise, I'm happy to get some of these out to help. Now, I am going to quickly try to get out my recommended change videos, because it sounds like Slytherin's planning on making some more changes on October 23rd, because they just released a patch recently with some balances, so I want to get all my recommended changes out with that series completed before they have their next patch release, because I've already worked and got about 60% of the way through the factions, and they've already started to release some changes, so there's going to be a little bit of redundancy with my video because I want to go back and remake it with that recent patch. But once I get through that, I'll go back to releasing these faction versus faction build videos. So I'll write down people's requests, and I will try to prioritize getting those out depending on which ones are asked for most commonly. So take it easy, guys.